Before you die, learn this. You are going to die, and right now, in this moment, you are not taking that seriously enough. Not morbidly, not anxiously. I do not mean the intellectual acknowledgement that at some point your biological functions will cease and your body will return to the elements that composed it. I mean the specific, visceral, completely real reckoning with the fact that the time between now and that moment is finite, is shrinking with every breath you take, and is being spent right now, today, in the specific texture of this actual day, on something. The question is whether what it is being spent on is genuinely worth the irreplaceable hours it is costing. Because here is what most people never honestly reckon with. The time you spent yesterday doing something that did not matter is gone. Not reduced, gone. Permanently, irrevocably, unconditionally gone. No amount of future productivity recovers it. No amount of eventual success retroactively makes the wasted time not wasted. The hours of yesterday belong to yesterday, and yesterday is a territory that no living person has ever successfully re-entered. And yet most people live as though they have an unlimited supply of tomorrows, as though the question of what they spend their time on today can be deferred to a more convenient season. As though the clarification of what genuinely matters can wait until the current distraction has been addressed, the current discomfort has been resolved, the current version of the life that is almost but not quite the right life has been replaced by the version that will finally justify the genuine engagement. The Stoics had a word for this deferral. They called it the greatest theft. Not the theft of something from you, the theft of something by you, from yourself. The specific, daily, completely voluntary theft of the irreplaceable hours of a finite life, taken from the genuine living of it and given to the postponement of genuinely living it. Today, on the Stoic mindset, we are going into the complete architecture of what must be learned, genuinely, deeply, practically learned, before the finite time runs out. Not as a scare tactic, as the most clarifying and the most practically useful lens available for understanding what actually matters, what deserves your genuine engagement, and how to live the specific, irreplaceable, finite time that is genuinely yours. This is the lesson the Stoics considered the most foundational of all. Everything else they taught was, in some sense, a footnote to this. There was a Roman physician named Antonius Musa who served as the personal doctor of the Emperor Augustus and who is credited in the historical record with saving Augustus's life through an unconventional treatment that the more cautious physicians of the era would not have attempted. He is remembered in medical history for this and for several other significant contributions to the practice of medicine in the ancient world. But what is preserved in the philosophical literature rather than the medical literature is a single event that occurred not in the imperial court but in his own private practice with a patient whose name the record does not preserve. The patient was a man of middle age, not old by any reasonable measure, not at a stage of life where death was the expected near-term topic of conversation, who came to Musa with a complaint that was, in itself, entirely treatable.
A persistent illness, moderately serious but not immediately life-threatening, that Musa assessed and began treating with his usual competence and care. And then, in the course of the consultation, Musa learned something about the patient that changed the quality of the conversation significantly. The man, in his treatment of the illness, would need to rest for an extended period, would need to step back from the work that had been consuming him, would be given, by the enforced pause of recovery, exactly the kind of space for reflection that the busy, productive, perpetually occupied life had not provided. The patient resisted this. He argued with Musa. He explained the urgency of the work, the projects that could not wait, the obligations that could not be deferred, the specific, entirely real and entirely compelling reasons why the enforced rest was inconvenient in ways that made it almost unacceptable. Musa listened to all of it. And then he said something that the patient wrote down afterward and that was eventually preserved in the philosophical correspondence of someone who had heard the story from the patient directly. He said, "You are arguing with me about the best use of the months required for your recovery. I am curious whether you have ever, with the same urgency, in the same conviction, argued with yourself about the best use of the decades that preceded it. The months required for recovery, argued about, urgently, the decades that preceded them, never argued about at all. The patient went quiet. And in the quiet, by his own account, something genuinely shifted. The contrast, the urgency applied to the forced interruption of the life and the complete absence of urgency applied to the life itself was so precisely, so devastatingly stated that it was impossible to receive without genuinely feeling what it revealed. He had been urgent about the interruption of his life. He had never been urgent about the life. That distinction between the urgency we bring to the things that interrupt our living and the urgency we should bring to the living itself is the architecture of everything we are going to discuss today. The first and most foundational thing to learn before anything else, before any specific skill or practice or understanding, is the complete, honest, visceral reckoning with the fact of your own mortality and the specific liberating clarity that genuine reckoning produces. The Stoics called this practice memento mori, remember that you will die. They returned to it constantly. Marcus Aurelius meditated on it regularly. Seneca wrote about it with a frequency and an urgency that makes clear he considered it not an occasional philosophical exercise, but a daily, practical, completely indispensable tool for the oriented life. Epictetus taught it to every student. Every generation of Stoics considered it the foundational practice of the examined life. Not because they were morbid, not because they were pessimistic, because they understood something about the human psychology that every person who has ever honestly reckoned with their own mortality eventually confirms. We do not take the finite seriously until we genuinely, specifically, viscerally acknowledge that it is finite.
The human mind's default relationship with its own mortality is one of the most thoroughly documented cognitive phenomena in all of psychology. We know, in the abstract, intellectual, third-person sense, that we will die. We have known this since we were old enough to understand death. We have watched other people die. We have attended funerals. We have heard the eulogies that compress a full human life into a few minutes of remembered highlights. And then we go back to our lives as though the information we just received has no practical bearing on how we spend Tuesday afternoon. This disconnection between the intellectual knowledge of mortality and the practical governance of daily choices is the specific target of the memento mori practice. The practice does not add new information. You already know you will die. It changes the quality of the relationship with that information. It moves the knowledge from the abstract, third-person, intellectually acknowledged category into the immediate, first-person, viscerally felt category, where it can actually affect the choices you make. The practice is this. Every day, not occasionally, every day, you sit with the specific reality of your own finite time. Not vaguely, specifically. You acknowledge that the day you are currently in is one of a limited number of days. That the limited number is genuinely limited, not in some distant, manageable-sounding, eventually but not now way, but in the real, immediate, completely unmanageable way that the finiteness of actual time expresses itself when you genuinely face it. And then you ask, with the urgent, genuine, completely personal quality of someone who has actually felt the finitude rather than simply acknowledged it in the abstract, what does this finite day deserve? What does the specific, irreplaceable, never-to-be-recovered quality of this day deserve from me? What am I giving it? The answers to these questions, genuinely pursued, honestly met, constitute the entire architecture of the oriented life. The life that knows what it is doing with its time and why. The life that has answered the question of what genuinely matters before the time runs out. The first lesson to learn before you die is what genuinely matters. And the specific, demanding distinction between what you have been telling yourself matters and what, in the honest light of the finite, actually does. Most people have never genuinely asked this question. Not because they are thoughtless. Most people think about their lives a great deal. But because the question is so large and so demanding and so potentially disruptive to the existing structure of their choices that the mind tends to approach it and then retreat to something more manageable before the genuine answer has time to arrive. Because the genuine answer is often uncomfortable. It often reveals that significant portions of the current life, the things being spent on, the things being worked toward, the things being sacrificed for, are not what the person would identify as genuinely mattering if they were genuinely honest with themselves in the specific, clear-eyed light of the finite. Seneca was ruthless about this. He wrote to his friend Lucilius about the specific, devastating discrepancy between how people spend their time and what they would say mattered to them if asked. He observed that people would say they valued their relationships most, and then give their relationships the leftover time after everything else had claimed its share. That people would say they valued genuine understanding and genuine wisdom, and then give their intellectual lives the attention that distraction and busyness left over. That people would say they valued genuine peace, and then fill every quiet moment with noise, because genuine peace, when it arrived, revealed too clearly the gap between the life being lived and the life that genuinely mattered. He was not judging, he was describing, and his description, 2,000 years later, describes the life of the average person in the modern world with a precision that time has not diminished. What genuinely matters, the Stoics had a clear answer, and it is not the answer that most people expect. It is not the achievement, the recognition, the accumulation of wealth or status, or the visible markers of success that the ambient culture of every era consistently presents as what matters. These things are preferred, genuinely worth pursuing when they do not come at the cost of what genuinely matters, but they are not what genuinely matters. What genuinely matters, in the Stoic understanding, is the quality of character you build, the genuineness of the relationships you inhabit, the quality of presence you bring to the moments that constitute the actual texture of a life, the honest engagement with the specific purposes that your specific nature is most fully expressed by serving, the specific, daily, completely unglamorous practice of being genuinely the person you are most capable of being, not in the impressive moments, but in all of them. These things, not the achievements, but the character from which the achievements express themselves, are what the eulogy should genuinely be about, not what you accomplished, who you were, how you made people feel, what the world lost when you were gone. Learn this before you die. Not in the abstract, in the specific, daily, practical choices about where the finite time goes and why. The second lesson is what genuine presence actually is and why the failure to practice it is the most common and the most quietly devastating waste of the finite time that most people never recognize as a waste. You have been alive for every moment of your life so far. But how many of those moments have you actually been present for? How many of the meals were genuinely tasted? How many of the conversations were genuinely heard? How many of the ordinary, unrepeatable, completely sufficient moments of a life that was happening in real time were actually experienced rather than merely passed through on the way to somewhere else? The answer for most people is significantly fewer than the total number of moments suggests. Because the untrained mind is almost never in the moment that is currently occurring. It is in the replay of the moment that already occurred or in the anticipation of the moment that has not yet arrived. It is managing its impressions, composing its responses, calculating its next move. It is anywhere and everywhere except the actual, immediate, irreplaceable present moment that is the only moment where genuine life is actually happening. Marcus Aurelius returned to this observation again and again in his journals, with a specific quality of someone who had experienced, through genuine practice, the extraordinary difference between a life that is merely occupied and a life that is genuinely inhabited. He wrote about the specific poverty of the person who has lived many years but has been present for very few of them, who has accumulated experience without actually having the experiences, who has passed through moments without genuinely entering them. The practice of presence is not the practice of forcing yourself to enjoy everything. Not every moment is enjoyable. The Stoics were never naive about this. It is the practice of actually being in the moments that are occurring. The difficult ones as honestly as the pleasant ones. The ordinary ones as fully as the extraordinary ones, rather than managing your way through them while your actual attention is somewhere else. The specific tragedy of the absence from the present is not just the missing of the moment. It is the missing of the life. Because the life is not the impressive moments that the absent mind was rushing toward. It is the specific, ordinary, completely sufficient texture of the actual days, the actual conversations, the actual light through the actual window at the actual time of the actual morning,
the actual quality of the actual relationship in the actual moment it was occurring. These things, unrepeatable and genuinely precious, were happening, and the untrained, absent mind was elsewhere. Learn to be present before you die. Not as a spiritual achievement, as the most practically significant single practice available for genuinely inhabiting the finite time, rather than merely occupying it. The third lesson is the complete, honest, non-negotiable practice of genuine relationship, and the specific understanding of what genuine relationship actually requires and why most people have never fully practiced it. At the end of a human life, the evidence is consistent across every culture, every era, every individual story ever honestly told. What people wish they had more of is not achievement or recognition or the accumulation of anything external. It is genuine connection, the specific, warm, completely real quality of having been genuinely known and genuinely loved by specific people whose presence in the life was not taken for granted, and whose loss, when it came, was genuinely felt because the presence had been genuinely inhabited. And the specific regret, the one that appears with remarkable consistency in the accounts of people who were genuinely reckoning with the end of their lives, is not that they failed to achieve more. It is that they were not more fully present with the people who mattered most. That the conversations that mattered were deferred to a less busy season. That the expressions of genuine care were managed rather than offered. That the specific, unrepeatable quality of being fully present with the specific, irreplaceable people who made the life worth living was consistently given less than it deserved. Seneca wrote about this with the specific warmth of someone who had understood the lesson through genuine experience. He said that of all the things a human being can give to another human being, full attention is the most generous and the most rare. Not time. Time can be occupied without genuine attention. Full attention.
The specific quality of being completely, genuinely, fully there, where the other person is not background to your own internal monologue, but the actual focus of your genuine presence. He said, most people die having given this quality of attention to very few people and very few moments, and that the failure to give it is the failure that cannot be recovered, because the people in the moments to whom it should have been given are not available again. Learn this before you die. Practice genuine presence in genuine relationship now. Not when the season is less busy, not when the children are older or the work is less demanding or the circumstances are more favorable. Now. Because now is the only time genuine presence is ever actually available. The fourth lesson is the practice of genuine honesty, with yourself first, and then with the people whose lives are most affected by your honesty or your lack of it. The dishonest life is not primarily the life of obvious lies. Most people do not tell obvious lies, or at least not many. The dishonest life is the life of the convenient non-truth, the impression managed, the vulnerability protected, the difficult conversation deferred, the genuine opinion withheld because offering it would produce discomfort, the genuine feeling unexpressed because expressing it would require the specific courage that unexpressed feelings never ask for. The cost of this chronic, habitual, completely understandable dishonesty is enormous and almost entirely invisible until you look for it. The relationship that never reaches the depth it could because the genuine conversation never happens. The misunderstanding that calcifies into permanent distance because the truth that would have dissolved it was never offered. The self you never fully become because the honest assessment of where the building is incomplete was never honestly made. Marcus Aurelius was honest with himself in his private journals with a completeness that most people never achieve in their most private moments. He recorded his failures of character with the same specificity that he recorded his genuine commitments. He noted his irritability, his temptation toward laziness, his temptation toward the comfortable story about a situation that the honest assessment would not support. He was, in the privacy of his own examined mind, genuinely honest about what he actually found there. And this honesty, this specific, daily, unglamorous, completely private practice of genuine honesty with himself, was the foundation of everything else in his life that was genuinely built rather than merely performed.
The dishonest person, the person who is dishonest primarily with themselves about their own genuine state and their own genuine choices and their own genuine character, cannot genuinely develop. Because genuine development requires the accurate assessment of where the development is needed. And the accurate assessment requires the specific, courageous, completely honest willingness to see what is actually there, rather than what the comfortable story claims is there.
Learn genuine honesty before you die, with yourself first, about what is genuinely true about who you are, what genuinely matters to you, where the gap between who you are and who you are capable of being is widest and needs the most urgent attention. And then from the foundation of that genuine self-honesty, practice the honest engagement with the people whose lives are most affected by whether you tell the truth. The honest life is harder in every single moment and more genuinely satisfying in the full arc. The dishonest life is easier in every single moment and hollow in the full arc. Choose accordingly before the arc is complete and the choice is no longer available. The fifth lesson is the complete, practiced daily understanding of what is genuinely within your control and the complete, practiced daily release of everything that is not. The foundational Stoic teaching applied to the specific, urgent, life or death context of the finite time. You're going to spend a significant portion of your finite time worrying about things that will not happen, resenting things that cannot be changed, fighting realities that will not yield to your fighting, managing impressions in the minds of people who will be gone before you are, or who you will be gone before them, and who will not remember the impression 5 years after it was made. This is not a personal failing. It is the predictable behavior of an untrained mind with a negativity bias and a deep investment in outcomes that are not fully within its control. But it is also, in the clear light of the finite, one of the most consequential possible wastes of the irreplaceable time. Epictetus made the dichotomy of control the first principle of his entire philosophy for exactly this reason. Not because the distinction between what is in your control and what is not is philosophically novel, it is not, but because the application of the distinction to the actual choices about where to direct your energy in every actual moment of every actual day is the most powerful single intervention available for reclaiming the finite time from the specific, avoidable, completely self-imposed waste of fighting what cannot be changed. What is in your control? Your judgments, your intentions, your effort, your character, your response to what happens, your quality of presence in the moments that are occurring. These things, and only these things, are genuinely, unconditionally, always and forever yours. What is not in your control? Everything else. The economy. Other people's choices. Your body's ultimate fate. The past. The future as it has not yet arrived. The opinion of people who do not know your interior life. The outcomes of your genuine efforts. The energy currently going to the second list, spent in the worry, the resentment, the impression management, the fighting of what cannot be changed, is energy that the first list desperately needs. The character building, the genuine presence, the honest relationship, the development of the specific gifts that are most genuinely and most unrepeatable yours. These things need your energy, and the energy is currently going to things that return nothing for the investment. Learn this before you die, not as a concept, as the daily, practical, completely real practice of the sorting that frees the energy for what genuinely deserves it. The sixth lesson is the practice of genuine gratitude, not the practiced social convention of the thank you note, but the specific, daily, visceral reckoning with the extraordinary fact that you are alive at all, and that the life you are alive to is full of things that the honest attention reveals as genuinely worth the full quality of its appreciation. The mind adapts to what it has. This is one of the most consistent and most practically consequential findings in all of psychology. We get the relationship, the health, the ordinary goods of the ordinary life, and within weeks or months we have adapted to them. They become the background, the new normal, the thing we no longer see because it is simply there. And then it is gone. through loss, through illness, through the natural impermanence of everything temporal, and the specific, devastating, completely clear-eyed quality of the grief reveals with absolute precision what the presence was worth and what the adaptation had made invisible. The practice of genuine gratitude is the deliberate, daily interruption of this adaptation, not through the forced appreciation of every circumstance. Some circumstances genuinely do not warrant appreciation, and the Stoics were never advocates of dishonest positivity, but through the specific, practiced, completely honest attention to what is genuinely present in your current life, that is genuinely worth the quality of your full, unhurried, genuinely felt appreciation. Marcus Aurelius practiced this through what the Stoics called negative visualization. He would deliberately imagine the absence of what he currently had, the health he currently possessed, the relationships he currently inhabited, the ordinary goods of the ordinary day, and let the vividness of the imagined absence generate the specific animal, completely real gratitude for the presence. Not as a morbid exercise, as the practical daily maintenance of the accurate perception of the value of what is actually there. Because the value is genuinely there, in the ordinary morning, the ordinary conversation, the ordinary health of the ordinary body moving through the ordinary day. The adaptation has simply made it invisible, and the practice of genuine gratitude makes it visible again. Learn this before the natural impermanence of the things you are currently taking for granted takes them from you, and the grief does the work that the practice should have done. Learn to see what is actually there while it is still there, to feel the genuine worth of the ordinary present before the ordinary present becomes the extraordinary past. The seventh lesson is the practice of genuine purpose, the specific, honest, completely personal identification of why you are here and the daily, practical organization of the finite time around the genuine expression of that why. Most people live with a vague sense of purpose, a general orientation toward being good, being successful, being a decent person, contributing something meaningful. These orientations are real, but they are insufficiently specific to govern the actual daily, minute-by-minute choices about where the finite time goes, because the minute-by-minute choices require the minute-by-minute guidance that the specific purpose provides, and the vague orientation does not. The specific purpose, the genuinely examined, genuinely personal, genuinely honest answer to the question of what you are most specifically here to contribute, is what the Stoics called living according to your daimon, the specific expression of the universal human nature through the particular human being that you are. The specific contribution that your specific gifts, developed through your specific experience, expressed through your specific character, make available to the specific people and communities whose lives you are in a position to touch. This specific purpose does not arrive as an announcement. It is discovered through the honest, sustained, completely real engagement with the questions that most people approach and then retreat from before the genuine answer has time to arrive. What do I find genuinely meaningful? Not what is impressive or recognized or rewarded. What is genuinely meaningful? Where does the effort feel like the purest expression of what I am? Where does the contribution feel genuinely worth making, regardless of whether anyone notices? The answers to these questions, genuinely pursued, honestly met, practically applied, constitute the architecture of the purposeful life. And the purposeful life is the one that, at its end, produces not the specific hollow regret of having spent the finite time on things that did not genuinely matter, but the specific, warm, completely real satisfaction of having used the finite time in the fullest possible service of what was most genuinely and most completely worth serving. Learn this before you die, not in a single revelation, through the daily patient, genuinely honest engagement with the question and the daily practical organization of the choices around whatever the honest engagement reveals. The eighth lesson is the complete, practical, daily practice of equanimity, the specific quality of inner settledness that allows a person to face everything the finite life contains, the loss, the failure, the genuine difficulty, the irreversible mistake, the inevitable decline of everything temporal without being destroyed by any of it. Equanimity is not indifference. The equanimous person feels everything the life contains. They grieve genuinely. They suffer genuinely. They are moved by what is moving and saddened by what is sad and frightened by what is frightening in the specific, honest, completely real way that genuine engagement with a finite life always produces. What they are not is destroyed by any of it.
What they cannot be, because the specific daily practice of equanimity has built something in them that genuine difficulty cannot reach, is permanently undone by the things that the unequanimous person is permanently undone by. The Stoics built equanimity through the combination of practices that the entire philosophical tradition was organized around. The acceptance of what cannot be changed, the complete engagement with what can, the daily return to the present moment, the honest reckoning with mortality that removes the specific paralyzing quality of the unexpected, the genuine gratitude that makes loss of what is temporary something that can be grieved without being collapsed by, the genuine purpose that provides, in the face of every genuine difficulty, the specific sustaining orientation that converts every obstacle from an ending into a test.
Epictetus demonstrated equanimity in circumstances that would have broken most people. Circumstances that were genuinely, completely beyond anything that philosophical theory can adequately prepare for. He was enslaved. He was physically harmed by his owner. He was in conditions that represented, in every external dimension, the complete removal of every circumstance that the comfortable life considers necessary for genuine well-being. And he was not destroyed by any of it. Not because he was not affected. He was affected by all of it, in the honest, real way that genuine human experience is always affecting. But because he had built, through the daily, earnest, completely real practice of the Stoic philosophical life, something in him that the circumstances could not reach. The inner citadel. The specific, genuine, completely real quality of a self that was located in something that external circumstances cannot take. Learn equanimity before you die. Not as the performance of unaffectedness, as the genuine, built, daily practiced quality of a self that can face everything the finite life contains without being destroyed by any of it. Because the finite life will contain things designed to destroy you, and equanimity is the only available protection that is genuinely within your power to build. The 9th lesson is the practice of genuine forgiveness, the complete, honest, completely practical release of the specific, historic, sometimes decades-old grievances that are consuming the finite time with the specific daily cost of their unresolved presence. The person carrying a genuine grievance, the specific, real, historically accurate wrong that was done to them by someone whose actions genuinely warranted the anger, is carrying something that is costing them more than the original injury ever did. Because the original injury was a single event, fixed in time, bounded by its own occurrence. But the unresolved grievance is an ongoing event, present every day, renewed by the memory and the rumination and the specific, completely unnecessary suffering of a wound that was inflicted once, and that the unforgiving person is inflicting on themselves every subsequent day by the maintenance of the grievance. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this with the specific practical urgency of someone who understood that the finite time was too precious to spend on the maintenance of injuries that the original injurer had long since forgotten. He wrote about the specific freedom of the person who releases the grievance, not because the wrong was acceptable or because the injurer deserves the release, but because the person releasing it deserves the freedom. The specific, immediately available freedom of a mind that is no longer occupied by the maintenance of the wound. Forgiveness in the Stoic understanding is not the absolution of the person who caused the harm. It is the release of the self from the ongoing cost of carrying the harm. It is the practical, pragmatic, completely self-serving decision that the finite time is too valuable to spend on the maintenance of a wound that the carrying of it does not heal and does not address and does not in any way alter the original wrong.
Learn this before you die. Not because the people who harmed you deserve your forgiveness, because you deserve the freedom that the forgiveness purchases. Because the finite time you are spending on the grievance is the finite time you are not spending on the people and the purposes and the experiences that your one, finite, irreplaceable life was actually for. Release the grievance, not for them, for the life you are currently spending on the maintenance of it. The 10th and final lesson is the integration of everything we have discussed into the specific, completely real, daily practice of the life that is fully lived, the life that, at its end, produces not regret, but the specific, warm, deeply earned satisfaction of having genuinely used the finite time for the things that were genuinely worth using it for. Because here is what the Stoics ultimately understood about the finite life that everything else they taught was organized around expressing. A life well lived is not measured by its length, it is measured by its depth, by the quality of the presence brought to the moments that constituted it, by the genuineness of the relationships inhabited, by the character built through the daily, unglamorous, completely private choices that no one saw but that together constituted who the person was, by the specific contribution made to the specific people whose lives were genuinely better for the specific human being who had genuinely, fully, completely engaged with living. Marcus Aurelius knew he was dying during the last years of his reign. The illness was progressive, and the end was not uncertain. And what his journals from that period reveal, in the specific, honest, completely private record of a man who knew the time was running out, is not desperation, not regret at the accumulation level. The specific, settled, completely genuine quality of someone who has done the work, who has been genuinely present in the relationships that mattered, who has built something real in the character that the daily practice produced, who has served the people whose welfare was his responsibility with the full quality of what he was genuinely capable of giving, who has been as completely and as honestly as the daily, imperfect, earnest practice could produce, genuinely himself. That quality of having genuinely done the work, of having genuinely inhabited the finite time with the full quality of genuine engagement, is what the eulogy should be about. Not what you achieved, who you were, not what you accumulated, what you gave, not how long you lived, how fully. Before you die, learn this, not as a future project, as the practice of the actual day that is currently happening. Because the day that is currently happening is the one you actually have, and the one you actually have is the one you can actually live fully. The rest is theory. The rest is the comfortable deferral of the genuine engagement with the finite time to a more convenient season that the finite time was never designed to provide. Begin now with the specific, honest, completely real quality of engagement that the finite life deserves from the specific, irreplaceable, genuinely valuable person who is the only one available to give it. Begin now, because now is the only time the beginning is ever actually available, and because the specific thing that no one ever learned after they died was what should have been learned before.
Subscribe to the Stoic Mindset right now, because this channel is where the complete, honest, deeply practical wisdom of the Stoic tradition, the wisdom that takes the finite seriously enough to treat every lesson as the urgent, immediately applicable, right now or never understanding that the finite actually warrants, is brought to you every week with the full depth and the full honesty that the subject demands. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell notification so that every new lesson finds you the moment it is released. Every week on this channel, we go all the way into the ancient wisdom that has always understood what the comfortable, distracted, infinitely tomorrow modern life consistently forgets, that the time is finite, that the finitude is real, and that the specific, practical, daily application of the understanding of that finitude to the actual choices of the actual life is the most urgent and the most important practice available to any human being who genuinely takes seriously the fact that they are alive and that the being alive will eventually end. The people who find this channel and stay are the people who have decided to take the finite seriously, who have decided that the comfortable deferral is too expensive and the genuine engagement is too valuable, who have decided that the lessons that should be learned before they die should be learned now. Subscribe right now. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Come back for the next lesson, because what we are doing here together is exactly what Antonius Musa's patient eventually did, after the enforced pause of his recovery produced the space for the honest reckoning that the busy life had never permitted. He stopped arguing about the interruption of his life and started engaging fully with the life. He stopped spending the finite time on the things that did not genuinely matter and started giving it, urgently and completely, to the things that did. Subscribe now. Begin now, before the time runs out.